For the second time in 3 seasons, the Philadelphia Eagles are heading to the Super Bowl. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. For the first time since 1986, the NFC Championship game featured 2 NFC East teams. This time it was the Eagles against the Washington Commanders. For the league, this was also the first time in a while that a team has had to play 3 straight home games to get to the Super Bowl. Usually a team with home field advantage typically plays 2 games. And though this one started out competitive, the Philadelphia Eagles wound up dropping a 50-burger on the Washington Commanders and capitalized on 4 turnovers to keep their season alive as long as it can go, defeating the Commanders 55-23 to play at Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Those 55 points scored by the Eagles are the most scored in the NFC Championship game since the Panthers scored 49 in 2015. This game was where the run game really shone. The Eagles put up 229 net rushing yards on more than 450 total net offensive yards. So this run performance was to be expected. The Commanders were one of the worst regular season run defenses in the league. They were ranked 30th in that statistic. And all but one of the Eagles' 8 touchdowns came on the ground, starting off with an electrifying first play on the Eagles' first drive as Saquon Barkley picked up where he left off last week, having a 60-yard touchdown run, giving the Eagles an early lead that they would never relinquish. Saquon actually had 118 yards on the day and 3 touchdowns. Huge credit to the offensive line for this game because the offensive line really had their work cut out for them. Cam Jurgens was questionable going into this game. He was active, but he didn't start. Landon Dickerson was the starting center for this game. But Landon Dickerson went out with an injury, and Cam Jurgens had to step in. Dickerson would come back, but ultimately, the Eagles continued to utilize Cam Jurgens. So the Eagles' offensive line, with Cam Jurgens and Lane Dickerson both playing through injury to get the Eagles to the Super Bowl, is a real testament to Stoutland University. That's what makes this run game possible, and both of those guys now have a couple of weeks to get themselves healthy in order to get into Super Bowl 59 form. Jalen Hurts, he was effective today too. He was 20 for 28 for 246 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. That was a dime to A.J. Brown. Jalen had a 110.1 passer rating. It's the second time this postseason that Jalen has had a passer rating of plus 100. Hurts also had 10 carries for 16 yards and 3 touchdowns of his own. One of those touchdowns came via a brotherly shove, and that came after a hilarious sequence of events where Frank Louvu supermaned over Cam Jurgens twice, causing him to get warned. And then the Commanders committed another offsides penalty, which caused the officials to throw around a never-before-used rule in the NFL rulebook, the palpably unfair act rule, which allows the officials to enforce a penalty for an act that is so categorically unfair that a standard penalty doesn't do it justice. The penalty can be anything decided by the officials up to and including awarding a touchdown to the offense. Especially if the defense commits multiple fouls to prevent a score, this is where the palpably unfair act rule can kick in. Now, there was a lot of online scuttlebutt after the palpably unfair acts rule was explained during the broadcast, which centered around the Eagles using a hard count, which could have potentially mitigated this for the Commanders. Pool reporter Zach Berman of All PHLY spoke to referee Sean Hockley following the game, and Hockley confirmed that the hard count is limited by the play clock, but the onus is still on the defense to not commit multiple fouls to prevent a score. Doing so causes it to be viewed as deliberate, which is why the officials issued a warning, and then anything further would have resulted in the officials awarding a touchdown to the Eagles, most likely. Back to Jalen Hurts, who didn't turn the ball over once this game. He now has the second longest postseason streak without a turnover in passing attempts. which is incredible. In fact, the Eagles didn't turn the ball over at all over the course of this game. No fumbles, no interceptions from the Eagles offense. The Eagles offense was, very simply put, unstoppable. There were no real issues here when it came to that. A.J. Brown had 6 catches for 94 yards. He was channeling that inner excellence all day. Devontae Smith had 4 catches for 45 yards. Dallas Goedert, 7 catches for 85 yards. And Kenny Gainwell had 2 catches for 16 yards. So those were your major passing highlights and passing stats, but many of these guys got in on the run game. Dallas Goedert, 2 carries for 13 yards, and Kenny Gainwell had 3 carries for 8 yards. Gainwell would have to leave the game later on due to an injury. So, again, the Eagles have some time to get themselves back into full form. Even Will Shipley got his first postseason touchdown after the Eagles pulled their starters late in the fourth quarter. Will Shipley followed in Saquon Barkley's footsteps. He had 77 yards on just 4 carries, including a similarly electrifying 57-yard run. It was great seeing Saquon celebrate Shipley following the drive that ended in Will Shipley's first career postseason touchdown. That was incredible. And that speaks to the character that this particular team has, where they're able to celebrate each other's success. And Saquon going over to Will Shipley and celebrating that, really just a powerful moment on the broadcast. But the Eagles' 7 rushing touchdowns gives the Eagles the record for the most rushing touchdowns in a playoff game. And that speaks to a quote that Saquon said that Fox Sports aired during the broadcast, which alluded to the fact that the Eagles were trying to show the league that you can run the ball down an opponent's throat and win in the NFL. And that's such a refreshing view because the NFL right now is a very pass-centric league. It just is. Most teams around the league are using a screen passing game or short passes to set up the deep ball. The Eagles, over the course of this season, have been using the run game so effectively that it's been very difficult for opponents to stop it. Flipping over to the defense continued its bend but don't break ways, and the defense did bend a little bit. They did allow the Commanders 350 net offensive yards, 22 first downs. The Commanders were able to convert on third down 7 out of 17 times, and they were able to convert on fourth down 4 out of 6 times. So definitely some concerning stats there, especially as it relates to fourth down. But that's something that the Commanders have been doing rather effectively over the course of this season. But it was scary at times seeing how effectively the Commanders were able to move the ball. Jaden Daniels, 29 for 48, 255 yards through the air. But the defense was able to get to Daniels, sacked him 3 times, and the Eagles defense held the Commanders to just 2 touchdowns over the course of the game. Most of the Commanders' scores came off of field goals. The Eagles also came up clutch by forcing the Commanders to turn the ball over 4 times in this game. 3 crucial fumbles, and then a Quinyon Mitchell interception, marking his 2nd career interception, his 2nd postseason interception. And the Eagles were able to score points on all 4 of those turnovers. The Eagles only attempted a field goal once. It was a 54-yarder in the second quarter, which Jake Elliott missed wide right. That's probably the only weak area following this game that needs significant improvement. Elliott needs to nail these kicks in 2 weeks. The Eagles also gave up a number of big plays, notably a 36-yard touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin, as well as a few other long passes to Zach Ertz, De'Ami Brown, and Brian Sinnott. But overall, this was just a complete win by this Philadelphia Eagles team. It's hard to believe that going into the bye at Week 5, there were doubts about whether or not the Eagles were going to be keeping Nick Sirianni and whether or not the Eagles would have the ability to get back to this point. But the fact of the matter is that Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are the only quarterback head coach combination in Eagles history to make it to multiple Super Bowls in their career. That is saying something big. And it's a real testament to the faith that the Eagles franchise has put in the people who are leading its football operation. It's also a real testament to the relationship that Jalen and Nick have built over the course of these last several years. Jalen spoke about that relationship after the game.
There's a lot that goes into what we do every day, and thank God for the opportunity. Thank Him for giving me focus and resilient and steadfast within it all. I think it's been a great group effort for us to be able to do what we've been able to do over the years.
But for now, the biggest thing is to get a little bit of rest here. Nick Sirianni undoubtedly has a plan for these next couple of days. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles used some of the time to get folks rested, to get folks ready to go. Because while this isn't truly a bye, since there's not really a game on Sunday, the Eagles have enough time to prepare for Super Bowl 59. But the Eagles season has gone as far as it can go. One more win, and we'll be bringing back another Lombardi Trophy and having a celebration on Broad Street once again. But let me know what you think in the comments below. What were your thoughts about this game? What really stood out to you? What concerns do you have? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning into the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and the Odyssey app. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles.